Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today begins our series of the explanation of 40 Hadith by Imam Nawawi. Now, I think it's important, before we actually begin, I think it's important that we go over some of the background history of 40 Hadith. Now, contrary to popular belief, Imam Nawawi was not the first scholar who collected a Hadith and called it 40 Hadith. In fact, it's said that Abdul Wahaab Mubarak was the first scholar to ever do so. Shortly after Abdul Wahaab Mubarak, several scholars begin to collect 40 ahadith, but call it 40 ahadith of mannerisms, or 40 ahadith of fasting, or 40 ahadith of zuhud, or 40 ahadith of khutb, of how to give a khutbah. Now, Imam Nawawi, what he decided to do was very, very interesting. And that is, instead of gathering 40 ahadith in a particular science, what he decided to do was to gather 40 ahadith that Islam is built upon. Each hadith either has rulings of fiqh or aqidah principles. And this is very, very important. And this is why, among other reasons, why Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith is so popular. So let's talk about how we are actually going to study 40 hadith. At the beginning of each video, we're going to go over the Arabic grammar of each hadith. Now, it's important for you to note that some hadith are very, very long. Therefore, we're not going to go over every single word. Rather, we're going to choose certain words from each hadith and go over the vocabulary of it. And if there is some benefit we can get as far as the conjugations of the words, especially if it's a verb, then we're going to go over the benefit of that, inshallah ta'ala. So once again, at the beginning of each video, before we go into the actual explanation of the hadith, we're going to go over Arabic grammar. Then the second thing we're going to do is, can we pull any fiqh principles from the hadith? And then shortly after that, we are going to go over the aqidah aspect, the Islamic belief that we should have that is mentioned in the hadith. So just as a summary, once again, on each hadith, what we're going to do is go over the Arabic grammar and then go over any fiqh principles that we can extract from the hadith. And then lastly, we are going to go over the aqidah principles that are mentioned in the hadith, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so let's actually cover some of the grammar within the first hadith. The first hadith, we have three words that we're going to do. The first word we're going to do is Amirul Mu'mineen. Amirul Mu'mineen. Try to say it. Amirul Mu'mineen. It means the leader of the believers. Now, the leader of the believers, known at that time, was Umar ibn Khattab. Interestingly enough, someone may say, well, isn't the leader of the believers the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And in theory, this is pretty true. However, the title itself was given to Umar bin Khattab. Now, the second question a person may ask, well, wasn't Abu Bakr as-Siddiq the first Khalifa before Umar bin Khattab? And you are correct. However, when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq became the Khalifa, he was known as Khalifatu Rasulillah. Khalifatu Rasulillah. And shortly after, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq died. When Umar ibn Khattab took the position of the Khalifa, it became difficult for some people to say Khalifatu Rasulillah. So therefore, they decided to make it very short and say Amirul Mu'mineen. Amirul Mu'mineen. And Umar ibn Khattab was the first person in the history of Islam to be called Amirul Mu'mineen. And this is why within the hadith, Imam Nawawi starts off by saying An Amirul Mu'mineen, on the authority of the leader of the believers. The second thing, if you look at your screen, that we're going to go over from the Arabic grammar and the vocabulary is kunya. What is a kunya? Well, a kunya basically is when you say Abu or you say For an example, If you say Abu Maryam, the father of Maryam, or you say Fatima, the mother of Fatima. One of the things I would like to mention, dealing with a kunya, it is not a condition that you actually have to have a child to have a kunya. You will find later on within the 40 hadith, we cover that the hadith of Aisha, it says, An Abdullah, the mother of Abdullah. However, we know Aisha, our mother, did not have any children. So how can she be called Abdullah? So one of the benefits we get here, dealing with a kunya, it is not a condition that you have to have a child by that name, or you have to have any children at all. The last word we're actually going to go over from the vocabulary of this hadith is innama. Innama is kalima al-hasr. Now, what that means is that it's a word used when you want to restrict something. When you want to restrict something. Now, innama in Arabic, anything that comes prior to that word is negated, and anything that comes after that word is for affirmation. An example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that only the believers are brothers. Now, this negates any other form of brotherhood. Now, unfortunately, today, in today's society, we have a lot of the youth, they fall into gangs, unfortunately. Or when we go to colleges, we have become a part of fraternity clubs. And we tend to take these particular things over the brotherhood of our religion. Now, this negates any form of brotherhood. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, that the believers are brothers. Another example that we find of innama in the Quran is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُنذِرٌ, only you are the warner. And this negates anyone else claiming to be a warner. Another example we have of this within the Quran is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُذَكِّرٌ, only you are the one who reminds. Another example, we have a famous statement by Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah. And he said, Ya ibn al-Adam, innama anta ayyam. O son of Adam, you are only just a number of days. Subhanallah. The rest of the statement that of Hasan al-Basri is, O son of Adam, you are only a number of days. When a day goes, a part of you goes with it. So the point we're trying to make here is the word innama means only. And it's only used when you want to restrict something. Anything that came before that is negated, and anything that comes after that is for affirmation. So let's see how it's used in the hadith. Okay, so let's actually cover the explanation of the first hadith. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. The reason why this is very important is because Islamic rulings cannot be deduced except that there's an intention to go along with the action. For an example, a person wakes up in the morning, they're very busy, so they do not eat breakfast, nor do they drink anything. They're rushing to work. Now, but by the time they get off work, it's about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. They realize, wow, I didn't eat anything. And Maghrib comes in around 7:30. So I might as well be patient for the next 2.5 hours, and hey, I will have the reward of someone who fasted. The answer to this is no, they won't. Because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that every action has an intention to come along with it. Therefore, this person, when they got up in the morning, they did not have the intention of fasting. So therefore, they do not get the reward of someone who woke up in the morning and had the intention of fasting, and they let off their food and their drink for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, we say they do not have that reward. Another example will be, let's say someone is a construction worker and they have dirt on their hands and their hair is dirty, and perhaps they have some dirt on their socks as well. They took off their shoes, they have mud in their socks, and they have dirt on their feet and their socks. So now they go to the bathroom and they'll wash their hands and they'll wash their face and they clean off their feet as well. This person says, okay, I cleaned the same areas that I would normally do when I make wudu, and dhuhr is in right now. So he goes to pray dhuhr. Is his salat valid? We say no, because the Prophet ﷺ mentioned إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that only actions have intentions to follow them. Therefore, he did not pray dhuhr correctly because he did not have wudu. Even though he cleaned the same areas, when he did that, he did not have the intention of wudu. So therefore, he does not have wudu. The Prophet ﷺ goes on to say within the hadith, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, that every person will have which they intended. Now this is very important. Another example that we can give will be a man, he marries a woman based upon her beauty alone. Or rather, a woman, she agrees to marry a man based upon he's handsome. No other reason, not based upon religion or good character or anything, just because they are pretty and he is handsome. Later on within their marriage, they have a lot of problems, and he starts to complain that, she's not upright, she doesn't pray, or she goes on to say he's very abusive, he does not have good character, he's not a good provider. And we go back, well, what was your intention in the beginning when you married this individual? Was it based upon their good character? Was it based upon their religion? Or was it only because they were pretty? Was it only because he was handsome? So therefore, we apply the second statement of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, that every person will have what they intended. You didn't have the proper intention when you married this person. You only sought after beauty, so you got what you wanted. Another thing that we need to talk about when we mention the second statement of the Prophet ﷺ, perhaps a person has a good intention. They want to memorize the Quran, and they have done everything they can possibly do to make that possible. However, they just always seem to keep falling up short. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, that every person will have what they intended. Therefore, we say that the fiqh ruling that applies to this person, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them as someone who has tried to complete the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though they did not do so, because they had the proper intention. Now, there's another side to this coin. Let's say a person has the intention to commit a particular sin. However, he or she did not stop doing this sin because they knew it was haram or they feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, they stopped doing this sin because something else stopped them from doing it. We say that this particular person will get a sin based upon his or her intention. The Prophet ﷺ mentions, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِلدُّنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يَنْقِيُهَا فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. The Prophet ﷺ mentions that whoever makes migration to Allah and His Messenger has made migration to Allah and His Messenger. And whoever has made migration for some worldly benefit or to take a woman's hand in marriage, then he has what he intended. This is very, very important. Before we actually explain this section of the hadith, we need to talk about what is hijrah and what type of hijrah is meant in this hadith. Now, hijrah in Arabic is someone who flees from one place to another. Now, in Islamic terms, this will mean someone who flees from the land of where he's oppressed to a land where he can practice his or her religion. Now, some of the scholars have mentioned there's two types of hijrah within this hadith that's being talked about. Some of the scholars mention there is a hijrah from a person's own evil desires, and this also applies to this individual. What is meant by that is that perhaps sometimes you can take a person from a particular land and put him in a land where he or she can practice their religion openly. However, if that person still has an evil soul, evil desires, no matter where that person is, they are going to commit the same sins. Therefore, a person, before they make a physical hijrah, they need to make a spiritual hijrah. Remove themselves from themselves. The second type of hijrah that is talking about within this hadith is that a person who leaves a particular place to somewhere else for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why even if the person gets to that particular place or they do not get to that particular place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will still reward the individual. And this is why in the hadith it is mentioned twice, where the Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. Notice that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, whoever makes hijrah to the Prophet, to Allah or the Prophet ﷺ, then he has made hijrah to Allah and the Prophet ﷺ. And when he mentioned whoever's made hijrah for some worldly benefit or to take a woman's hand in marriage, notice that he did not mention it twice, to show the reward of someone who goes somewhere to be able to practice their religion. Now, someone may say, well, in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ, whoever makes migration to Allah and His Messenger. But Muhammad ﷺ is dead now. How can we make hijrah to Allah and His Messenger after his death? We say this, what we say about this is that a person, if he is oppressed in a particular land where he cannot practice his or her religion, then going somewhere when they can practice with their religion, where Islam is taught, then this is considered to be making hijrah to Allah and His Messenger, even though it is after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, whoever makes migration for some worldly benefit. Now, a person may say, well, in today's society, I may find a good job in another state and I may go there. Is that blameworthy in Islam? And we say, no, it's not. And it's not, this part of the hadith is not applicable to that particular situation. If a person takes a job in a particular state, we say that a person should try to find out what is the Muslim community like in that particular area. Do they have Islamic schools for my children? Once a person considers these factors, if he or she decides to still go to that particular state to take that job, it is not blameworthy. It is not blameworthy. The Prophet ﷺ went on to mention, or a person leaves solely to go to a particular place to get married for no other reason, to take a woman's hand in marriage for no other reason, then some of the scholars have mentioned this is also blameworthy. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ did not mention it twice, as he has mentioned in the beginning, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. That whoever makes a migration, and we said spiritual and a physical migration to Allah and His Messenger, then he or she has made a spiritual and a physical migration to Allah and His Messenger. There is a principle that we need to cover when we talk about someone who has made migration solely for worldly benefits, for no other reason. This principle is من عمل للدنيا لا يحصله إلا ما نوى إذا شاء الله. And this translates to mean that a person who does an action solely for this world and no other reason, that he or she may not get that particular thing except that Allah decrees it. This principle is extracted from the following ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Isra, من كان يريد العاجلة الجنة له فيها ما نشاء لمن نريد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, whoever should desire the immediate fast life, we hasten for him what we will, for whom we intend. So once again, we mentioned that a person who does a particular action solely for this world and no other reason, he or she may or may not get it, depending on if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees it for them or not. Similar to what we mentioned at the beginning of the hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى, and a person will have that which they intended. With this, we end the explanation of the first hadith of Imam Nawawi. If there are any questions regarding the first hadith, please leave it in the comments below, and inshallah we will try to answer them as fast as possible. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, whoever does not thank the people has not thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we'd like to thank you for listening in on the explanation of 40 hadith. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.